with me individually.
Okay.
That's better. I mean, it's entirely possible that people will unload emotionally, but it's there's a limited. Yeah.
Okay,
So-
where's, no music, where's the music? I don't hear it. Please feed us the music.
It played and you're on.
Well,
It sounds like we're on, Lee.
we're on the air, I guess.
Yeah.
Usually I wait to hear Aaron Copland's music, which is my theme song, but I guess it's been played for the public, but not for me.
Mm-hmm.
So welcome to Struggles of the Spirit.
Well, thank you, Lee. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm your host, the Reverend Leland Udell, and I have a special guest here today, Joe Covais. And he's someone I'm getting to know, and after some, well, I guess, a few months maybe, and really enjoying him. You want to tell a little bit about what you do, Joe?
Well, I teach psychology classes at Community College of Vermont. I work as a psychologist for the state Division for the Blind and Visually Impaired, counseling blind folks, visually impaired folks. And I do some writing. And
Do you publish somewhere?
I've got a lot of magazine articles published, but I don't have any books published at this point. Hopefully that will change in the course of the next couple of years.
Do you get employed as a conference resource person?
I have been hired as a speaker, yeah. So that has happened. It's not something I really sort of actively pursue, but it comes along with the territories.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I've done some of that myself, but not recent years. I kind of like the intermix that you have with your guests, with your fellow
Yeah.
conference people.
Well, Lee, I'm all yours for the next hour. What would you like to know?
Well, the secrets of your heart. Let's see, where should we start? Well, the public wouldn't know our special situation. Why don't we begin there, talking about that, and then we can go into other details. Dear public, I have about half of my vision available to me, but not on a very good level. And Joe has no vision at all, at all. So he will never see this tape that we're making. The tape that you're seeing right now, it's not visible for him. And I'm seeing him professionally as someone who needs help coping with being partly blind, and he's the expert because he's fully blind.
And I spent probably 8 years, maybe longer, as partly blind.
Yeah. So the big question that I have for me personally, which I think ought to be brought up for the public to hear, and we do want the public to phone in. Our telephone number is on the TV screen in the lower section. We have a special number that will ring right in the studio for the technician who runs the cameras, and he will let us know that you're on the line wanting to talk, and you have something to say, and he will make that happen electronically. So please, when you want to say something or ask something, please phone that special number, and he'll place the connection in the electronic network so we can hear you and respond to you.
I'm dying to talk to someone.
Now, you hear that as a challenge, where we're sitting here waiting for your phone call. You have to
I dare people to call in.
we save Joe from sudden death. But we really want to hear your questions. Remember, this is a special interactive television program, which is different than any commercial television, generally speaking, that you ever can turn into your home set on, because there you can't get on into the program with famous actors and actresses. Whereas here, with famous Joe and Lee, you can get into the program by just phoning that special number on your TV screen, and we'll be connected to you, and you can say what you want to say, and we'll respond to you as well as we can. So please do that. Now, I have to say on a different note, if you're watching this show on a rerun, so that we're not sitting here always day and night live, if you want to get feedback from us, you have to send it to us on your email connection. And that way we will see the email connection, and we will get back to you by email or telephone or whatever you prefer. But we're set for both watching us in person or connecting with us via some email device. So please participate with us, be a part of this program. It'll be a lot of fun for you, and educational and helpful. So we await your call. But you can call us right now. You don't have to wait for an email connection. You can just get on that telephone and call us and say, I've always wondered about A, B, and C, so please educate me.
I'll try to say something provocative during the hour to make sure
Okay.
people call.
Well, you could say it's a better world if you don't see anything than if you see everything accurately. It's sort of a switch on Plato's allegory of the cave, which you probably are familiar with.
I am.
And what is the real world? The world of shadows and figures on the wall of a cave, or the real flesh and blood human beings who are walking and talking and interacting? What's the real world? And so we can talk about that.
Well, I'll talk about it.
Okay, please.
I just offhand, I would say that no, I do not see the world more accurately for being blind.
Okay.
I see it less accurately because I'm operating on a much narrower range of information.
You have no visual information of your own.
Well, supposedly over half the information that our brains take in about the environment is visual.
Half.
Over half. The number I've been quoted is 60%. How they arrive at that, I don't know, but it's over half. So I'm operating on less than half of the information that the average person is operating on.
That's amazing.
And I'm having to rely on a much narrower range of information. So no, I don't see the world more accurately.
Mm-hmm.
I've had the rather irritating experience of going to a play with sighted people and having them say to me afterwards, well, you probably saw it better than we did.
Oh.
No, rest assured.
They're trying to be gracious.
I did not see the play better than you did. You saw it better than I did. You appreciated it more. You got more out of it. It's not to say that I didn't get anything out of it. It's not to say that I couldn't follow it. But no, I did not appreciate it more.
I think they're trying to be gracious to you.
Well, and yeah, there's certainly that element, but there's also that element of a kind of, I don't know, mystique about people that are blind.
Yeah, I guess
That they somehow have supersonic hearing, or they are sensitive in ways that sighted people are not sensitive. I don't think so.
You have special gifts.
I don't think my hearing is any better than it was when I was a sighted person.
Yeah.
In fact, In fact, I know for a fact that my hearing is getting worse.
If you as everyone gets older, their hearing usually fades.
Yeah, and my hearing is fading, and I can tell. And my hearing did not get better when I turned blind. Now, I make more use of it. I listen to noises much more than I ever did before because I'm forced to. But do I hear things that I didn't hear 25 years ago? I don't think so. I think it's simply that 25 years ago, my vision filtered out and signaled to my mind not to pay attention to that sound. It wasn't important.
No, I buy that. I worked a lot with terminal patients in the medical center here and in New York City. And I would often run across patients or families who would say, you know, we have special gifts now that we didn't have before since we're dying. I'd say, well, I don't believe that God is giving you special gifts and abilities and talents that you need to cope with life, which you didn't need before. That's not true. That's a rationalization. It's a wish, you know, that were so, but it's not in my experience.
People think that being blind, sometimes I am more sensitive to people's states of mind or emotional states.
Yeah, I've heard that said.
I don't believe that. I've also come across the phenomena of people feeling that the blind are somehow have a special connection with the world of the spirit or the spirits, as if we have one foot in the grave. We can feel ghosts or communicate with the dead. It's not true. It's just not true.
Then they have,
I don't find any of those things.
and then we have these negative associations, the blind leading the blind, you know.
Well, in the case of my wife and I, that's true. She's blind as much as I am.
But I mean, it's a negative term if you're blind. That's the way it's used commonly.
Yeah, sure. Doesn't bother me. My wife and I have had a few times when we've been walking down the street together, and someone will yell out from an automobile, "Look at that! It's the blind leading the blind."
Do you think that's funny?
It is funny.
It depends on your attitude, I think.
It doesn't bother us at all. It is funny. We are sort of a walking. What's the term?
Model?
A walking saying.
Something that you said about the essential ability of your sight to communicate with you what's going on. And without it, you don't see as well, you don't understand as well. I've found that to be true. And to my own surprise, for example, if I'm in my own house and the room is dimly lit, so I can't very clearly see the windows and doors and bookcases and chairs, I tend to get lost in my own house.
Mm-hmm.
I can't recognize things that I know cold, know a lot about, where the chair is, where the bathroom is, where the front door is, where the dog always sits for his nap. I don't have that knowledge anymore. And so it amazes the public and even family members and me that that disappears. That's that knowledge of your own world around you. Even though you've lived in that house for a long time, you don't completely recall the direction of the front door if you can't see. Even though
Well, maybe you're relying on vision.
Yes, yeah.
Right. If you were more relying on sound,
Yeah.
the echo of your voice, the
Mhm.
reverberation of your voice off of walls,
Yes.
tactile cues such as the texture of walls or carpet or bare floor, things like that, you might not get lost as often. You're in a difficult situation, Lee, because you're still, to a significant degree, living a sighted life.
Yeah.
You have a significant amount of vision still, but it's not necessarily of much use.
Yeah, I can't see your face.
You can't really rely on it.
You could stick your tongue out at me and I wouldn't know it.
There, I just did. Or did I? You don't know.
I
do you?
don't know. I don't know.
Well, you could do the same to me.
Of course. But it would give me no kicks to know you can't see me doing it.
Yeah. I'll say that when I was what would probably be more accurate to describe as visually impaired, right? A low vision person.
That's the way I've been for some years now.
I found it to be more difficult.
And why? That's my situation. So I'd like to hear what your analysis is.
It was more difficult because the urge to use whatever sight you have is overwhelming.
It is.
It's very seductive.
Yep.
And we tend to feel that as long as we are using sight, two things are the case. A, we're not really blind, and B, we won't lose it. That somehow there's a notion, I know I experienced it and other people have reported the same thing, that if you don't use what vision is remaining, that it will evaporate.
Well,
It'll go away.
use it or lose it. You know the term.
In that case, it's not really so. It's not really so. I mean, a person's vision is deteriorating for whatever reason, macular degeneration, retinitis pigmentosa, diabetic retinopathy, whatever the reason. Using that vision to get around is not going to, it's not going to stabilize or retain your vision any longer than if you found other ways of coping with your environment. Finding other ways of coping more successfully with your environment is not going to make your vision atrophy and disappear. It's not that way. It's not like a muscle in that way. So those are two things that operate against people when you're in that visually impaired, low vision state. I know that when I was down to my last 10%, 5%, whatever, single digit number
right.
it was, I walked into more telephone poles. I
Oh,
fell down
sure.
more staircases. I bumped into more things and knocked more things over. And it was more exhausting because I was constantly trying to peer and discern and sort of grope my way through this very, very truncated and very corrupted field of view that wasn't doing me much good. So I was blind in my right eye already. I spent years walking around with one hand up around my left eye, shielding my eye from glare, which was a real problem. So I spent years walking around with my left hand up to my forehead like this. And when I went completely blind, it was a relief to be able to put my hand down.
I believe that.
It was nice. Since I've gone completely blind, I don't fall down staircases the way I used to. I don't I do knock things over. I don't walk into telephone poles as much. I don't, and it's just mostly, it's not as exhausting in that way. It's not quite as frustrating. It is frustrating, but it's not frustrating in that immediate sense, in a physical sense. It's not as physically frustrating. It would be, I would say, more psychologically or emotionally frustrating. But physically, not so much, because I'm not trying to peer and discern constantly and use that vision. I'm not trying to use it, so there's nothing to use.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's that element. There's also the element that I bottomed out. There is no more vision to lose. I had a period of 7 or 8 years, maybe 8 or 9 years, where my vision just steadily deteriorated from month to month.
You could
And
see it.
sometimes things would stabilize for a period of a couple or a few months, but essentially every 4 to 6 months I made the realization that I could not really see something which I could see 6 months previous.
That's
And
depressing.
It was exceedingly depressing. It involved going through this whole adjustment, this series of adjustments, right? You know, adjusting, denying that that's the case, accepting that it's the case, being angry about it, blaming myself for it, blah, blah, blah. And then I would sort of come to a period of acceptance. Well, if I can't drive anymore, that's okay. At least I can still walk around.
Yeah.
Well, if I can't pick up a newspaper and read the way I always did, at least I can pick up a newspaper and read with a jeweler's eye loop.
Right.
Yeah, or a very powerful magnifying glass. If I can't really see the real world very well, at least I can see things on television screen look very good. So that was no shocker. Television looked better than real life anyway.
Really?
So
Yeah.
that's true for everyone. Television looks better than real life.
For me, television moves too quickly.
No, the thing is that the television was backlit.
Yeah.
So I would typically be in a room where, because of glare, I would have to keep the lights rather dim. But even in the dim light or with strong light, I couldn't really tell what was around very well.
Mm-hmm.
I could see gross forms, but I couldn't really discern things very well. But for some reason, computer screens, television screens, because they were lit from within, there was a period of 2 or 3 years there where I could see a television screen or a computer screen quite well.
Really?
But anything else I could not really see very well at all.
Did you find that I was going to say the medical profession or the professional groups of opticians, optometrists, et cetera, did they understand your situation really? Really understand it?
Well, they understood what was going on from a medical point of view.
Yeah.
From a physical point of view, yeah. I think it's a difficult thing to understand from a psychological point of view or an emotional point of view if you're not in that position.
I'd like one of our viewers, who I'm sure has the problem that you and I are talking about, to phone in, and we'd like to hear from you. Help us to know we're not alone. We know we're not alone, but still, it would be good to hear your voice calling our office and exclaiming, communicating with us and the rest of the TV world what it's like to be in this situation. So please give us a call. I thought I heard someone connecting, but
So now I'm, for the last, a little over 10 years now, I'm completely blind. I have no light perception whatsoever. It's just a sort of gray, amorphous plane out there.
you don't
It does
see.
have texture to it, but it's not particularly interesting to look at.
There are no pluses to that. Where your ability to hear has increased, or
No, my hearing is not increased.
yeah.
I just pay more attention to what I hear.
So-
Because it's as a survival mechanism,
Mhm.
but it backfires. People have asked me, well, you probably enjoy music a lot more now. The fact of the matter is, I hardly listen to music at all.
Well, why is that?
Specifically because I'm blind.
Yeah.
Not that it sounds any better, or does not sound as good, but I'm so dependent on environmental sound that I can't afford to be listening to music.
What does that mean? I still don't understand.
It means that I spend most of my waking hours sitting at my desk at the computer. My computer is speaking to me,
You have one of those computers that will do that.
right? So as I type, the computer reads back to me what I'm typing. Or as I bring up documents or files, or go to web pages, the computer reads to me whatever text appears on the screen. Now, if I've got music playing in the background, I cannot hear it as well.
Right, right.
So consequently, in my sighted days,
You
I
can do-
used to play music in the background
You can do both.
when I would be reading or when I would be typing or working. I can't do that now. In my sighted days, if I were doing something not at my desk, but around the apartment, let's say folding clothes or putting things away, making dinner, whatever a person might do in their apartment, I would have music on. I can't do that now. Because when I'm cooking, I have to be very aware of what's going on,
You don't
lest
wanna-
I set the apartment on fire.
And you don't want to burn yourself.
And I don't want to burn myself or scald myself. So that means no music. Because I have to listen to every little clue to tell me what's going on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not that I do any cooking now, but my
Your wife is
but my
listening.
wife is blind, and she does cook. She cooks, and she's a fabulous cook. But she can't really listen to music when she's cooking. So, no, the blindness has caused me to have to really limit listening to music very much. I don't think I listen to 10% of the music that I used to listen to.
So you have more losses, really.
Yeah. Ah. Mhm.
Oh, Joe.
I don't recommend it.
I think not.
Yeah.
I think not.
I don't recommend blindness, all right? I don't know what I was thinking at the time when I decided to go blind, but you know what? It is what it is, and it's you work with what you've got.
Well, what you're saying helps me understand. I have a friend, when I had a little bit more sight than I have now, we would go hiking, and he had a lot of blindness in his eyes, and he would vigorously walk down this kind of steep woodland path and would fall full length, you know, I mean, and I said to him, you know, you're walking too fast. You can't possibly be stable in this condition here, with not seeing very clearly what rock is in front of you, what log is going to trip you. And he just didn't really answer me, but that's what he did. He just sort of ignored his physical limitations, just tried to, by ignoring them, make them go away. It didn't work, and I was appalled that he would treat himself like that. But I guess it was out of a sense of despair and fury and frustration and
Denial.
denial.
Yeah.
And,
I find blindness to be extremely limiting, very isolating.
mhm.
But even given those facts, I'm surprised at how happy I am.
Well, you don't seem depressed at all,
Being
Joe,
blind
the little bit I know you.
Well, I know I'm on camera right now, so I have to present well.
You present very well, Joe. Otherwise, I wouldn't be seeing you. I don't need being somewhat a depressed person because of my blindness. I don't want to be influenced by another person who's even more depressed.
Yeah, yeah. But don't think that I don't get depressed about it.
You're a human being.
I find it pretty annoying just from day to day.
Yeah.
And if anything, it's I think taught me to be more patient and methodical. But it is rather frustrating.
Joe,
There are times when I can't imagine how I'm going to make it through whatever span I have left to be on this physical plane without ever seeing anything again. It's inconceivable to me. I
How
don't
could
know
that
how I
be?
would do it, or
Did
how
you-
I will do it, but I will do it. I'm just-
Joe, I want to physically, I'm putting my hand out toward you. I want to say, I respect and love your honesty. You know, I grasp
Like as a handshake thing?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
all right.
yes, yes. You're a wonderful man.
Well, I don't want to sugarcoat this.
No, no,
You know,
you're
it's not. It's not a.
No.
It's not a situation I would recommend to anyone or
Not to
wish
help
on anyone.
the growth of the soul.
But that being the case, it's not the end of the world either.
No, no, no.
That's part of the paradox of it.
You want to,
Is the fact that it's not the end of the world. Things
say,
do just go on.
why is it not the end of the world for you?
It's not the end of the world because life goes on. You still wake up in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
and you're still blind. So, in a physical, literal sense, life goes on. And as long as the music plays, you got to dance one way or another, as best you can. The alternative is not all that attractive.
No, not at all.
right.
Not at
So-
all, Joe.
The music is playing, you've got to dance, so you do what you can. And life is going on. It's going to go on with you or without you. So which is it going to be?
Yeah, yeah. You have that choice.
And as long as it's going on with you, well, if that's the case, then we may as well do what we can to maximize what we have to deal with.
So how do we, I mean, you're doing it with me, but how do we support each other in this struggle? How do we help each other as fellow human beings to survive this situation?
How do you mean?
How do we keep from becoming just members of the depression group or the damn the world and I want to get off? There's a tendency to want to feel that way. And,
Yeah.
how do you avoid it? How do you avoid getting depressed and sinking into depression?
Yeah. How do you minimize it?
Yeah.
For me, I would have to say that I minimize it by keeping myself busy, doing things that have some kind of meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to concentrate on those areas which I enjoy and which I can still participate in. When I was sighted, I was a very avid collector of antique photography.
Mm.
I cannot participate in that in any way, shape, or form anymore.
Does that make you angry, bitter, unhappy, sad?
If it makes me sad, and if I gave attention to that, if I sort of allowed myself to drift around in reveries of antique photography collecting, then it would make me bitter and sad. Yeah, yeah. So I don't. So those antique photographs, periodically, I take some out, I put them up for sale, and And when I have to review them or inventory them to write descriptions, you know, to offer them for sale, it's a difficult thing. It's somewhat upsetting for me.
It's like selling part of yourself.
It is, yeah, sure. You know, these are antique photographs of some significance and some value, and to me, I can no more tell what they are than I can a receipt from Hannaford's.
Yeah,
It's the same thing.
yeah.
So that's a very frustrating thing, and it doesn't feel very good. So I try not to dwell on that. I try to dwell on what I can do. I have a very different, in a lot of ways I lead a very different life now than I did 20 years ago. I concentrate on those parts of it that are not so dependent on vision, and those parts of it that were very dependent on vision, I've pretty much tried to shed them, right? Slough them off like a snake sheds its skin. It does involve really a kind of a metamorphosis. You have to be able to reassemble yourself. You have to be able to rebuild yourself as a person who doesn't see, as a person whose sense of how you define yourself or your self-identity is not so dependent on sight.
So you can't just breeze along. You have to really reconstruct yourself.
You have to reconstruct yourself very, very literally. Yeah, yeah. You know, I often think of our personalities as in a metaphor terms. And if you remember back to when we were small children, or I don't know if they still have them today. I hope they do, but I suspect they don't. Blocks with letters
Oh, sure.
on them. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, I love them.
Well, you know, if you think of each block as representing some facet of our personality. Right? So in my case, you know, this block might represent Joe, the antique photography collector, Joe, the antique dealer, Joe, the, you know,
The
Joe,
book.
yeah, I mean, whatever. But and each of us constructs our personalities out of these different blocks, right? Joe the husband, Joe the boyfriend, Joe the son or the brother.
Yeah.
And it's as if we fashion something three-dimensionally constructed from these blocks, and that is in total our personality, who we are. Well, you go blind, and my experience of it has been, and I'm pretty sure from talking to other blind people that they have experienced this similarly, that it's as if somebody comes along and just knocks that all down.
Wow.
And those blocks are scattered all over the floor. Now, for a normal sighted person, what would you do? You would go and you would pick up those blocks and you would reassemble them in the way you had them.
Right, right.
For a blind person, that's impossible. For a blind person, it's very difficult to reassemble those blocks. So my experience as I went blind was that tower of blocks that was Joe Covais as of, let's say, 1990, when I was the last time I was a fully sighted person, those blocks were periodically being taken away. It was being deconstructed slowly. It was melting down. And as they were taken away, they were sort of cast off in one way or another. When I went completely blind 10 years ago, it was like somebody came along and just took whatever was remaining and knocked it over. I didn't really know for the first few months. I had a very poor sense of really who I was anymore. The only thing I knew I was this blind guy that lived at 101 College Street. Right? I was the blind guy.
You called yourself that.
I thought of myself that way because I certainly wasn't an antique photography collector anymore.
Yeah.
I certainly wasn't someone who appreciated watching different kinds of movies and videotapes anymore. Well, that wasn't the case anymore. I wasn't an antique dealer anymore. I wasn't any of those things anymore.
Yeah,
So I was the blind guy that lived on the 3rd floor. I was the blind guy that went into the Oasis Diner every day. And that was how I thought of myself, and that was the only real way that I had to think of myself. And it wasn't really a whole lot to hang your hat on.
no,
All right?
no.
Now, the state did send me, after a little while, they did send me down to a school for the blind. And
Where is that?
this particular one was the Carroll Center for the Blind in Newton, Massachusetts. The great thing about it was that everyone there is blind.
Yes.
So you go down there, you meet someone or you're introduced to someone, hi, I'm Joe, I'm the blind guy. Well, that, you know, that won't
Big
get you
deal.
anywhere here.
Yeah.
Everyone on this bus is blind. Right? So during the 3 or 3.5 months that I was there, it really forced me to get down on all fours and feel around on the floor and locate or retrieve as many of those component parts, as many of those blocks of my personality as I could find. And it forced me to try to reassemble some kind of personhood, some sense of myself again. Now, is it as complete as it was in 1990? Not by any means. Is it the same shape? Not at all. Does it contain many of those same parts? Yeah, it does. It does. I'm essentially the same person that I was in 1990. Yeah.
That's very helpful, Joe.
So that was the useful part of going to the School for the Blind. Not so much that they taught me to read Braille. I could have learned to read Braille by correspondence. Not so much that they taught me to get on the Boston subway system with a cane, blind. There's no subway system I don't live in Boston, there's no subway system in Burlington. It wasn't so much that as it was recovering a sense of who I was outside of being a blind guy. And that was the really useful part.
Would you repeat that again? Recalling?
Recovering a sense of who I was outside of, beyond being a blind person.
Okay. That's helpful. I hope all of you non-phoning people who have some eye troubles will hear what Joe just said, because it's important.
Lee, I can't believe nobody's calling in.
No.
I personally have to say I'm very disappointed
Well,
that we haven't gotten any phone calls.
I am too.
I am dying to talk to somebody.
Come on,
Please.
we're waiting.
I'm going to go home, I'm going to throw myself on a mattress and cry into a pillow if I don't get some calls.
I hate to say it, but my title of my program is Struggles of the Spirit. We're struggling here. Well, what gets me, Joe, is that friends who watch the program will tell me how important it is and how much they like it and how much
Yeah.
it speaks to them.
Yeah.
And I'll say, then why don't you phone in? Well, you know, they just don't want to do that.
Well, it's a very small percentage of people who do.
Yeah. Part of the problem is the timing. If it were in the middle of the day, I mean, if it were, no, the end of the day with a
Yeah.
more prime time, then I would get more people
Yeah.
to phone in.
Mhm.
But people are out busy driving around or cooking at home or cleaning or sleeping or whatever. It's not a good time for them to watch the
It's like
television.
with the radio talk shows, you
Yeah.
know that if you get one caller on a particular subject, there's probably something like 500 people or 1,000 people who are interested in that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
No question. No, I have no compunction about whether it's interesting or not, or relevant or not. I'm just frustrated that people are so afraid of television. I know when I first started in doing television as a producer in New York City, I was intimidated by it, by the the camera. I didn't want the camera staring at me. And we had, this was a CBS place on 57th Street on the west side, their main CBS studio. And there was a control person like our friend here, sitting on a little movable dolly, self-propelled, and he and then two others would be cruising around in this large studio, filming us. And then when the red light would turn on, then we know that we were on his camera, and he was transmitting our pictures and our voices to the whole nation. And that was kind of scary. But this is not like that. This is much more cozy, I think, anyway. I hope you don't feel intimidated.
Oh, can't you tell? I'm terribly intimidated right now. No, I'm altogether comfortable.
Well, as I tell people very openly, I want to educate people on this program. I'm not trying to entertain them at all. I'm not trying to get my guests to break down and cry or to admit his or her worst fear or whatever. That's entertainment. That's not education.
Although, I would have to say that my experience teaching is that there needs to be some element of entertainment in order to hold people's attention.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Otherwise, they won't get the educational message. So.
Yeah. Well, I assumed that we would do that ourselves as we spoke and as you talked about how it felt and how you feel. But we're not getting any phone calls, which is frustrating.
Well, that's too bad. What else would you like to talk about?
Well water in Vermont.
One of the few things about which I have nothing to say. I can talk more about blindness if you like, or I can talk about other things.
No, I think blindness is an important subject. For me, certainly, and for many, many other people. I find people begin to lose good sight when they're in their 50s, or maybe even earlier. It's not something that just happens for people who are stricken with some horrible eye problem. It's pretty universal. Maybe not to the point that you become blind, but I remember when I started having glaucoma troubles, in the 40s, when I was 40 years old, that's what I mean. I told my ophthalmologist I was having that trouble driving on the interstate. I said, I can't drive faster than 50 miles an hour. It seems like there's a huge gulf, an abyss in front of me, and I just don't want to drive so fast that I could fall into it. And he said, oh, that happens to everybody when you get older. Which isn't true. I mean, I have friends who drive pretty rapidly in that age.
Yeah. But as we have an aging population, which is living to an older and older, longer and longer lifespan, there is a really burgeoning number of people who qualify as legally blind.
Yeah. It grows every year. Yeah.
90% of the people, or more than 90% of the people who are blind are legally blind or have some useful eyesight. The proportion of people who have no light perception is really quite small.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yep. I remember how earlier in my years of going to eye doctors, how I would struggle, valiantly to list all the different letters that I could see in the refractoring process. And now it's hard to see anything. And to my horror, the technician will say, "Can you see this? Can you see what I'm doing here? Can you see that?" There was nothing of a finesse at all. It was pretty gross, you know. Can you see that I'm moving?
Yeah.
That I have one hand up or two hands? Or if I put up all my 6 hands.
Yes.
But, as you say very wisely, that we have to rebuild the building blocks that we have constructed our lives out of from the beginning.
So has that been a difficult thing for you to do?
Well, I haven't been able to put it conceptually the way you just did today, and I find that very helpful. So I have a conceptual picture of what I need to do. I mean, I've been doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I never dreamt that I would be doing a TV show when I was first in ministry. That was the last thing I was interested in. You know, I've been doing it somewhat unconsciously without plan, but your thought, your statements help me to make that a stronger commitment to put up new building blocks. Maybe new building blocks that I hadn't thought of before.
Right. Right. You do. It is necessary to not just rearrange the blocks that we have left, but it is also necessary to acquire new ones, to acquire to sort of assimilate and accommodate into our definition of ourselves that element of blindness.
Mm-hmm.
Believe me, I never thought of the white cane as being an accoutrement of sort of a, you know, hip urban male, right? And I still don't really. But on the other hand, I've come to the point where I feel if I can function well, if I can get around, if I can perform well, I don't mean perform in a Bernadette Peters kind of way, but perform as in, you know, accomplish what I need to accomplish and do it in a competent way with the cane, then you know what? That's not such a bad thing.
No.
And so if part of who I am is a blind guy who does pretty well, that's not such a bad thing, and I'm willing to take that on. I'm willing to accept that. With some pride, I would even say.
Well, yeah, you should.
Yeah.
You should have
Sure.
pride. Yeah.
Do I take some pride in being able to do what I'm able to do? Yeah, I do. And
Well,
maybe
sure.
maybe it's misplaced when I think of it maybe from a more spiritual sense, but I would have to admit that I do take some pride in the fact that when I teach, I write on the board, just as I would have done if I were
You do that.
cited. I don't have someone write on the board for me. I write on the board. Absolutely, I write on the board.
Why do you say absolutely? That was your style before.
I never taught when I was sighted.
Oh, okay. Well, then
I've
why do
only,
you, then
I've
why do
only
you
ever
write?
taught as a blind man.
So why do you write on the wall, on the board?
Why do I write on the board? It could be on the wall, I don't know. Why do I write on the board? Because teachers need to write on the board. And I'm not going to teach if I have to have someone writing on the board for me,
Yeah. No, I understand.
right?
Yeah.
If I have to have someone write on the board for me, if I have to have someone take attendance for me, if I have to have someone read my students' papers for me, it's just, for me, it wouldn't work.
Then you'd be giving up your
For me, it wouldn't work.
yourself.
I would feel like, well, how much am I actually teaching? And how much am I actually teaching? How much of this is just a sympathy job? You know, give the poor blind guy a job, and even though we lose money on him because we're providing all of these people to write on the board and read the papers and do this and this and this, you know, well, it makes us look good. So it's a public relations thing.
5 minutes.
But that's not the case. And, you know, I operate in the classroom just as I would really if I were sighted, with some minor adjustments.
Sure.
Yeah. I always have students who think they can sneak out halfway through class.
And you nailed them.
And eventually I do, yeah. Eventually I do.
Well, we have 5 minutes left.
That's all?
That's all we have left. Those people who are going to phone
Lee,
in.
I'm furious that we didn't get any phone calls.
Yeah.
I am furious.
I guess it shows that people are full of denial.
But you know what? I'm going to
couldn't
pick up the shattered pieces of my life and carry on.
Bravo. Bravo. Oh, but you helped me a lot today by talking about the building blocks. I mean, as a child, I used to do a lot of building work with building blocks and making great edifices, and it was a lot of fun. And
You know what, though? All of this stuff, we've been talking about blindness this hour, but all of what we've discussed here and talked about in relation to blindness, it applies to most anything.
yeah, well,
It could apply to being in a wheelchair. It could apply to loss of a loved one. It could apply to anything.
oh, sure. You and I have heard people say that without my beloved spouse, I can't go on living.
Yeah. Yeah, but the fact is that life does go on, and
Yeah.
we have to continue, and we have to find a way to do that. We're sort of obliged to.
Suicide is not an attractive route.
I would agree, and I would say principally so because of the effect that it has on other people.
Yeah. And you think of the effect it would have on other people who are struggling with the same disability.
Well, that's one, but also the people, you know, who love us,
Yeah, they don't want to lose us.
to whom we are important.
Yeah, that's true.
It can be a very destructive thing.
Yeah, it's part of being a responsible human being.
There's I don't remember the exact statistic, but there is an interesting statistic showing a correlation between people who commit suicide and them being the children and grandchildren of other suicides.
Ah,
Now, on the one hand, you could interpret that as saying, well, this is a depression that runs in the family, and they're just depressed enough to commit suicide.
Right.
But suicide is a very specific act. There are a lot of ways to be depressed. Suicide is a very specific act, and witnessing a suicide or the aftermath of a suicide, or living with the suicide of a parent or a brother or a grandparent, it really does make it significantly more likely that if you inherit that propensity toward depression, or you experience that depression later in life, you're more apt to think of suicide as a way to
get out.
escape from it. But let's not end our discussion talking
No,
about
our time
suicide.
is just about gone. Joe, what do you want to say? In the last minute we have left?
I want to say that it's a beautiful day today,
It is. We looked out the window this morning. and it
that
was
tomorrow
grand.
is Thanksgiving. There's a lot to be thankful for.
That's true. That's true.
And
Somebody told me that, well, there's the music at the end, but
is that the Red Pony music?
Red Pony music.
All right.
You're going to hear it.
Yes.
Aaron Copland is one of my
Yeah.
favorites. And he comes from a Russian Jewish background, which I think is wonderful.
Well, Lee, thank you for
Well, you're very
having me
welcome.
on today. I enjoyed this.
delight.
Yeah,
You haven't been on a show like this before.
I have. Yeah,
You have?
yeah.
Okay. Well, you do a great job. And you've helped me.
Are we still on?
We're still on until the music dies.
Mm-hmm.
When the music is gone, then the program's over. It's over.
Okay.